To our ever-supporting professor in Social Change and Development Perspective class from Chudora Robete, and to our beautiful and handsome classmates, a beautiful day to you. We thank you for spending this time with us. We warmly welcome you to this video lecture by my partner, Ms. Marnie Monsalud, and yours truly, about social change and development through the social institutions, economy, and education. We hope you'll learn something new that you may use on your current and future social work at your respective institutions. And to start, let's give a round of applause to welcome Ms. Marnie Monsalud. Take it away, Ms. Marnie.
Okay, so we will be discussing an overview economic growth in the Philippines. For our introductions, since the end of the Second World War, the Philippine economy has had a mixed history of growth and development. Over the years, the Philippines has gone from being one of the richest countries in Asia, following Japan, to being one of the poorest. Growth immediately after the war was rapid, but slowed over time. But in this short-lived video, we will see how the economic recovery and growth happened in the Philippines.
The Philippines, one of the most dynamic economies in the Southeast Asia region. With increasing urbanization, a growing middle class, and a large and young population. This country has seen many ups and downs in the history. From one of the contenders of Asia's tiger economy, to the lower income country. The Philippines has gone through many changes. So stick around, and let's find out what this rising economy is like. The Philippines was once a model of development, and also second among East Asian economies after Japan. In the 1960s, when South Korea was a land of peasants, the Philippines was one of the Asia's industrial powerhouses. They produced consumer goods, processed raw materials, and had assembly plants for automobiles, televisions, and home appliances. But in the 1970s and 80s, the Philippines' economy declined, while its neighbors such as Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan made exponential growth. The major reason behind this decline was the country's protectionist policy. You see, after World War II, imports of the Philippines increased drastically. At the same time, exports reduced. This led the country to follow protectionist policy. Due to this, they lost many valuable investments that time. Other reasons for this include political and social unrest and corruption. Due to all of this, the Philippines also fell out of the race of Asian tiger economies. But by the start of 2000s, the Philippines' economy started to grow again. You see, many countries achieve their economic growth by slowly transitioning from agriculture to industry to service sector. Yet for Philippines this transition was very quick. The service sector of the Philippines overtook the industrial sector in terms of GDP contribution during the early 80s. The GDP contribution of this sector increased from 36% in 1980 to 60% today. The service sector today employs 56% of the country's workforce, which is more than the agricultural and industrial sectors combined. The main reason behind the growth of service sector is, the Philippines was a former U.S. territory. And the U.S. had a very strong cultural impact on Philippines. More than 90% of the people in the country speak English as their second language. The cultural similarities gave them the opportunity to become the most popular business process outsourcing country. Plus it is also popular for other back-office jobs. And all of this for significantly low cost than the Western countries. Now if you look at the industrial sector, it still holds 30% share in the country's GDP, and employs 18% of the workforce. Yet this seems considerably low. And the reason behind this lies in the geography of Philippines. You see, the country is spread over 7,000 islands. This makes transportation very difficult. And it also limits land for development. Hence this explains why Manila, the capital of Philippines, is one of the densest cities in the world. Plus the high energy prices here make them more unattractive for manufacturers. This is why Philippines' economy turned to the service sector so quickly in the 80s and 90s. Now even though the geography brings in disadvantages, it also has a bright side. You see, Some of their islands and beaches are consistently named as the best in the world. The country is also a home to world-renowned natural wonders, like underground rivers and rice terraces. They also have incredible diving spots, rich biodiversity, and much more. Things like these give tourism a significant boost. Many economists believe that tourism will be their major sector in the future. Another source that brings a big chunk of income is remittance. The remittance accounts for more than 9% of the Philippines' GDP. This makes them the fourth largest in terms of remittance. The major reason behind this is, the country has a large and young workforce. In fact, the average age of a Filipino is just 25 years. But the country lied to create well-paid jobs to this huge manpower. So, in order to make more money, people tend to go work in foreign countries. Another reason is, the Philippines has a good education system which is suitable for many foreign countries. So, the Filipinos usually have the required skills to be hired. Well, things look pretty good till here. But wait, we still haven't talked about the challenges yet. First, let's talk about the FDIs. Compared to other regional countries, the Philippines has quite low flow of foreign direct investments. There are many reasons for that, like the relatively poor infrastructure. This is a main problem for both industrial as well as tourism sectors. Also, some economic policies are making it harder for companies to do business. Today, the Philippines is ranked 95th in the Ease of Doing Business Index. And this is really not good. Now if we take the service sector, the main pillar of the economy, then yes, it might also face challenges in the future. As companies around the world are now looking to use artificial intelligence, companies are promoting AI-backed chat boxes and Cybertron voice for BPOs and in other areas as well. So relying heavily on any one sector might not be a good move in the future. Now if you look at the present, then lockdowns due to the pandemic made the situation worse for the domestic economy of Philippines. You see, the Philippines is still heavily dependent on cash transactions. Majority of people here don't even have a bank account. And this makes it harder for the government to provide relief packages. Even though the Philippines has managed to lift many people out of extreme poverty, this crisis could lead to increased poverty rate. And also income inequality between the urban and rural, which is not good in microeconomic terms. So, in order to make economic progress, the Philippines really need to work on stuff. If they did it right, then who knows, someday they could be an economic powerhouse.
On the next slide, you will see how the impact of different administrative in economic development. In this presentation, explained a severe recession in 1984 to 1985 saw the economic shrink by more than 10% and perception of political instability during the Aquino administration further dampened economic activity. During his administration, President Ramos introduced a broad range of economic reforms and initiatives designed to spur business growth and foreign investment. As a result, the Philippines saw a period of high growth, but the Asian financial crisis triggered in 1997 slowed economic development in the Philippines once again. President Estrada managed to continue some of the reforms begun by the Ramos administration, so later on, we will be given emphasis to the timeline of economic change in the Philippines. Despite an occasional challenges to her presidency and resistance to pro-liberalization reforms by vested interests, President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo has made considerable progress in restoring macroeconomic stability with the help of well-regarded economic team. However, despite the recent progress, fiscal problems remain one of the economic weakest point and biggest vulnerability. President Aquino, the Philippines received the investment grade credit rating on its foreign debt, proved the low tax to GDP ratio remain a constraint, supporting increasingly higher spending levels, staying high and inclusive growth over the longer time. 2016 saw the election of President Rodrigo Duterte, who has pledged to make an inclusive growth and poverty reduction in his top priority. Duterte believes that the illegal drug use, crime, and corruption are key barriers to economic development. The administration wants to reduce the poverty rate to 17% and graduate the economy to upper middle income status by the end of President Duterte's term in 2022. For our following slides, it will give us an information about the size of the economy and how an economy is performing here in our country. So first, what is gross domestic product or GDP? It is the final monetary value of the goods and services produced within the country during a specified period of time, normally a year. So guys, before showing you the timeline, the Philippines was less severely affected by the Asian financial crisis than its neighbors, aided in part by more than 7 billion in annual remittances from overseas Filipino workers, except for 1998, when drought and weather-related disturbances pulled down agricultural harvests, combining with the construction in industrial sector production, or the real gross domestic product (GDP) has recorded positive growth year on year. To make it more specific, here's the other timeline of GDP happened in the Philippines. In 1970 to 1980, country ranked among the 10 leading gold and copper producers worldwide. During 2000, context of a global economic slowdown, export slump, and domestic as well as global political and security concern. In 2002, growth accelerated, reflecting the continued resilience of the service sector, gains in industrial sector output, and recovering exports, reflecting improved level of intra-Asia trade, export receipts expanded. During 2003, weaker global demand. In 2004, the Philippine peso had weakened, reflecting uncertainties over export and balance of payments prospects, resurgent peace and order worries, and political uncertainties in the run-up to the May 2004 national election. The full-year gross domestic product (GDP) growth was pulled up by hefty 6.1% expansion of the economy in the last quarter of the year, making it the highest fourth quarter of GDP since 1989. The manufacturing, mining, and finance sector were the main growth drivers, happened in 2005. During 2008, the current account balance fell into the negative range, the first time since the 2000 global financial crisis, in part due to an ambitious new infrastructure spending program announced this year. In 2011, economic growth has accelerated and competitiveness ranking have improved. During 2016, has pledged to make inclusive growth and poverty reduction is top of the priority. In 2017, the employment rate declined. 2018, the main drivers of growth for the quarter were construction, trade and repair of motor vehicles, motorcycle, personal and household goods, and other services. During 2020, contributors to the decline of GDP growth for the fourth quarter of 2020 were construction at 25.3%, other services at negative 45.2%, and accommodation and food service activities at negative 42.7%. And in this 2021, the main contributors to the decline were construction, which is negative 24.2%, other services negative 38%, and real estate and ownership of dwelling negative 13.2%. So let's move on the next slide. Before explaining the three types of sectors, we should be aware that investors use sector to place stocks and other investment into categories such as technology, healthcare, energy, utilities, and telecommunication. Each sector has a unique characteristic and a different risk profile that attracts a specific type of investor. So let's proceed in the types of sector. First is the primary. It involves the retrieval and production of raw materials such as corn, coal, wood, or iron, Coal miners, farmers, and fishermen are all workers in the primary sector. Next is secondary. It involves the transformation of raw or intermediate materials into goods, as in steel into cars or textiles into clothing. Builders and dressmakers work in the secondary sector also. So next is the tertiary. It involves the supplying of services to consumers and businesses such as babysitting, cinemas, or banking. Shopkeepers and accountants work in the tertiary sector. Here in the Philippines, we have agriculture, industry, services, mining, and mineral processing. Garments, electronic, and automobile parts are the most important sectors, and most of the industries are concentrated in the urban areas around metropolitan Manila. Mining also has a great potential in the Philippines, which possesses significant reserves such as chromite, nickel, and copper. Significant natural gas finds in island of Palawan have added to the country's substantial geothermal, hydro, and coal energy reserves. We should also consider that our farmland comprises more than 40% of the total land area. So here is the agricultural and forestry. Approximately 97.5% of the forest is owned by the government and is administered by the Bureau of Forestry. 2.5% is privately owned. The great bulk of the forest is in large blocks in the principal islands such as Luzon, Mindanao, Samar, Negros, and Palawan. Luzon is the largest island in the Philippines. Although the Philippines is rich in agricultural potential, inadequate infrastructure, lack of financing, and government policies have limited productivity gains. Philippine farms produce food crops for domestic consumption and cash crops for export. The agricultural sector employs nearly 40% of the workforce but provides less than one-fifth of GDP. More specific, mining in the Philippines, our country is well endowed with mineral and thermal energy resources. A recent discovery, like I was mentioned earlier, the natural gas reserves of Palawan Island has been brought online to generate electricity. Also, Philippine copper, gold, and chromite deposits are among the largest in the world. Other important minerals include gold, nickel, silver, coal, gypsum, and sulfur. The Philippines also has significant deposits of clay, limestone, marble, silica, and phosphate. So in industry, industrial production is centered on processing and assembly operations of the following. So we have food, beverages, tobacco, rubber products, textiles, clothing and footwear, pharmaceuticals, paint, plywood and veneer, paper and paper products, small appliances, and electronics. Heavier industries are dominated by the production of cement, glass, industrial chemicals, fertilizer, iron and steel, and refined petroleum products. Industrialization causes the income of people to rise and improve their standard of living. There is a rise in income and so rate of savings, rate of investment, and rate of spending also arises automatically. This is an important event of the rapid growth in the Philippines. Before finishing my presentation, I would like to share this powerful and inspiring quote from President Rodrigo Roa Duterte saying, "We cannot move forward if we allow the past to pull us back." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Marnie, for that very insightful discussion. And to proceed, I would want to discuss with you the social change and development through the social institution, education. Education in the Philippines has undergone several stages of development, from the pre-Spanish times to the present. Let me share with you the history of Philippine education system. During pre-Spanish period, education aims for survival, conformity, and enculturation, and most of its contents are information, education, religion-oriented, and the method it is being sent is by tell me and show me, and observation and trial and error. While during Spanish period, the aim of education is to propagate Christianity, and its contents are religion education and vocational courses. And the method was dictation and memorization. The vernacular was used as the medium of institution in the parochial schools, and religious order introduced the parochial school. Education is suppressed, exclusive, for the elite only, and inadequate. Education during American period aims to teach democracy as a way of life. Its contents are reading, writing, arithmetic, language, GMRC, civics, hygiene and sanitation, gardening, domestic science, American and Philippine history. The methods are socialized recitation and students' participation, and during this time, formal education was established. The education during Commonwealth period, years 1935 to 1942, aims to develop moral character, personal discipline, civic conscience, and vocational efficiency, and also to teach the duties of citizenship, and also to continue the promotion of democratic ideals and way of life. It is provided by the 1935 Constitution. The contents are character education and citizenship training. So here, during this time, education was to help prepare for the coming independence of a new Filipino nation. On the other hand, the education during Japanese era years 1943 to 1945 aims to strive for the diffusion of the Japanese language in the Philippines and the termination of the use of the English language in schools, and also to stress the dignity of manual labor. The contents are vocational, technical, agriculture, values rooted on love for labor, physical education, and singing Japanese songs, health or vocational education. There's no other way but to go up. Education during the Republic time, years 1943 to 1972, aims to full realization of the democratic ideas and way of life. And it's also for the promotion of equal educational opportunities for all. The contents are social orientation as manifested by the conservation of the Filipino heritage, training for occupation, promotion of democratic nation building, and a new thrust on community development. Education on the first set of New Society in years 1972 to 1986 aims for national development, wherein education is made relevant to the needs of the changing world. It also uses bilingual education policy wherein English and Filipino as media of instruction in specific learning areas. Furthermore, the education on the second set of New Society in years 1986 to 2000 aims to promote national development and values education. The national budget appropriates the highest allocation for education, promotion and improvement of the public school teachers, implementation of the new elementary school curriculum or NESC that address to civic, intellectual, and character development of the child. The Congressional Commission on Education, EDCOM, with its report in 1991, recommended the following: trifocalization of DECs into the Department of Education or DepEd, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority or TESDA, and Commission on Higher Education or CHED, and also the establishment of Teachers Education Center of Excellence, the professionalization of teachers, and technical vocational education reform. Education during the 21st century aims to provide the school age population and young adults with skills, knowledge, and values to become caring, self reliant, productive, and patriotic citizens. Under Republic Act Number 9155, Governance of Basic Education Act was passed transforming the name of Department of Education, Culture, and Sports or DEX to the Department of Education, DepEd, and redefining the role of field offices, the regional, division, and district office in schools, The Act provides the overall framework for school head empowerment by strengthening their leadership roles and school based management within the context of transparency and local accountability. And last but not the least, the K 12 program from 2012 to present. Under Republic Act number 10533, known as the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, it was implemented starting school year 2012 to 2013, wherein kindergarten is now a part of the compulsory education system. A new curriculum for grade 1 and grade 7 students was introduced. Grade 11 or year 5 was introduced on school year 2016 to 2017, and grade 12 or year 6 on school year 2017 to 2018. Philippines education system's ultimate goal is for every graduate is inculcated with the respect for human rights and values, notably makadiyos, makatao, makabansa, at makakalikasan. This makes every graduate empowered to effect positive changes in his or her life and that of others. Allow me to share with you the two developments in Philippine education system. The Philippines aims to modernize education system. According to Department of Education Secretary Yunor Magtolis Briones, modernizing education systems requires continuous upgrading of both content and delivery of teaching and learning, making full and creative use of technology in the digital age, while ensuring that such modernized education systems are able to reach every potential child, youth, and adult learner excluded by economic, social, political, geographical, and physical barriers. Secretary Briones also brought the country's commitment to expand and enhance the Alternative Learning System or ALS to international attention. The department secretary pointed out that modernization of the education system must not and will not be at the expense of 4 million out of school children and youth and a significant section of the labor force who have not completed basic education yet. The challenge, therefore, is item number 1 to provide mechanisms for equivalences and international recognition for alternative learning system beneficiaries. The secretary also pointed out that K-12 program is not about simply adding school years to basic education to be at par with international norm, but more about the content and the intended outcomes in terms of upgrading education quality. So, in modernizing education system, another challenge is item number 2. There's a need to experiment and be open to new pathways to innovation in teaching delivery and content. Another development in the Philippine education system is inclusive education. The 2009 Department of Education Order Number 72 defines inclusive education as the philosophy of accepting all children regardless of race, size, shape, color, ability, or disability with support from school staff, students, parents, and the community. This also means reaching out to all learners, addressing and responding to diversity of needs of all children, youth, and adults, and involving changes and modification in content, approaches, structures, and strategies. First on the list is the special education or SPED. It is part of the education system in our country and is implemented through a specific program both targeting children with disabilities and gifted and talented learners who need a systematic and deliberate process to achieve functional literacy and achieve their individual potential and capability. Secondly, there are also Indigenous People schools for Indigenous People's Education or IPED and are registered within the Department of Education. They are mainstreamed in the national education system, but there's benefit from some flexibility in terms of curriculum, teacher recruitment, and school calendar. We also have the madrasa education. It is provided in public and private schools within the context of Muslim culture, customs, traditions, and interests through the integration of the Arabic language and Islamic values education are alive in the basic education curriculum. We have also alternative learning system or ALS, and it's a parallel learning system to the formal education system, usually conducted in the community learning centers. It was established by the 2001 Governance of Basic Education Act that provides an opportunity for out-of-school population to access to and complete basic education. And there are also alternative delivery mode programs that are based on self-learning modules to cater for learners in difficult and different circumstances. Our online classes falls under this category of inclusive education, but it is usually given to disadvantaged children. We use Mimosa or modified in-school and off-school approach for elementary and open high school program for secondary, wherein there are four categories: the distance learning, modular learning, online learning, and home-based learning. There is also street children education, but there is an ongoing enhancement on the implementation of the Kariton Classroom project in the partnership with the Dynamic Teen Company, led by Mr. Efren Peña Florida, Hero of the Year awardee by CNN. And there's also an ongoing stock taking activity in selected sites that will implement this program. Last but not the least, there is an education for sexually abused children. I believe this is happening to the institution of Miss Annabella and Perla in Tamar Foundation. But the DepEd is still institutionalizing the personal safety lessons in both elementary and secondary schools nationwide. There are also an ongoing training of trainers for the basic education levels. There's still an ongoing coordination with the agencies to ensure the welfare of this sector. Those are the history and developments of the Philippine education system. Now I just want to share with you a video about the quality of education in the present that is related with the Philippine economy.
Joining us in the studio this morning on Hot Copy for their thoughts on the study of what's being done to improve the quality of education in the Philippines, we have with us this morning Education Department Secretary Leonor Briones. Welcome to Hot Copy, Secretary. It's been a while.
Yes, it's good to be back.
Thank you. All right, well, you come, news isn't so good. Let's discuss this.
Yes.
The PISA ranking of Filipino students, the test was conducted among 15-year-old learners.
Yes.
Is that correct?
2018.
Okay. Philippines ranks the lowest among 79 countries when it comes to reading comprehension, and it's in the low 70s in math and science.
Yes.
This is quite alarming considering the Philippines is known to essentially be an English-speaking country. In fact, it's always said that language is our soft power worldwide. What is happening? Why did this happen?
Well, we have to bear in mind that our educational system, the 10-year basic education system, was set up in 1940. And this is 79 years old before we finally moved on to add 2 more years in senior high school. And the PISA test showed that the senior high school kids who were 15-year-olds as well compared to junior high school kids perform so much better. Yes, that is within the strand. Yes.
Under the PISA test, did they get only public school students or also private school students in the Philippines?
It was a mix. It is a stratified random sampling, 2-stage, very complex but thorough, and we included, of course, the private schools as well. And the private school kids performed better in the 3 categories than those in the public school.
All right.
That's
Now,
what the numbers say.
okay.
Yes.
You do have some lawmakers citing possible reasons why Filipino students in the public school sector are rating low. And I want to ask you if you agree with this, okay? Senator Kiko Pangilinan points out to hunger as the basic reason or one of the reasons for low ranking. Would you agree that hunger is a factor in terms of reading comprehension?
Yes, on a global scale, the countries which were at the bottom of the chart of performances tended to have high levels of poverty and hunger. And we are even advocating in the Philippines expansion of our school feeding program, because nutrition, hunger, and the capacity to read or to comprehend or to reason, of course, is linked to nutrition.
Okay, but if
Yes.
that would be one of the reasons, why did India, for example, rank higher in terms of reading comprehension when we do know that poverty is also prevalent in India?
Not as high perhaps as in the Philippines. And this is why it's very important for us to improve our statistics, our numbers, to reduce the level of hunger and poverty in the Philippines. Otherwise, the capacity of our learners to absorb learning on a global scale will be severely compromised. We decided to participate after much debate, not
Yeah.
only internally but also with our external partners and supporters, because we needed to look at the international mirror. Because even Karen, the national assessment tests indicated low performance,
Yeah.
in spite of our
Efforts.
illusions,
Yeah.
our thinking that we are the best in Asia. That's how I grew up,
Wow.
being taught that we are very advanced relative to other Asian countries and perhaps the rest of the world. Now, we look at the mirror and see that other countries either have overtaken us or have been better all the time.
Okay,
All
that's
along,
quite interesting that in a way you are admitting that we're coming from a generation of maybe educators that had the perception, oh, we're the best in Asia or Southeast Asia.
The first to learn English,
Yes.
the only English-speaking country in Asia, and so on and so forth. But in the meantime, the other countries have been catching up and spending so much more than we have been spending for education. One other factor, in addition to poverty and hunger, is the level of spending for education, because the global standard is at least 5 to 6% of the GDP, and we are nowhere near that in terms of our budget, even if we say also again that it is the largest budget in the entire public finance system.
Okay, but when you talk about the budget, you do go back to issues of you give a department this much budget and yet they're underspending. There's an issue of absorptive capacity. DepEd has been pointed out to have a very low disbursement rate, just like the DOTR and the DPWH, supposedly under the COA report. So is it just the money, or is it the quality and the way we teach, frankly?
We agree totally. Insofar as the disbursement rate, the capacity to spend the budget, well, in the year 2018, we had 96% disbursement rate and obligation rate. This year, we are targeting for 95% disbursement rate. The numbers have changed dramatically since 2016. That is insofar as the budget is concerned. And also, even before the PISA results came out, because of the national assessment tests, which were also not very flattering, we already convinced and submitted a budget to the legislature pointing this out. We are underperforming.
Okay.
We already said that. And also to the cabinet, and this is why they are really supporting education at this time. Pero ang pivot is to quality.
Yeah,
Kasi
okay.
yung access, nandiyan.
And allow me to end this lecture with this message. For many Filipinos, a solid education is often the only way out of poverty and despair. Parents who force their children to drop out of school to help out in the fields or on the store should heed this warning from the wise. Education costs much, but lack of education costs much more. In behalf of Miss Marnie Monsalud, we want to thank every one of you for joining us in this video lecture. May God bless you all. Take care.